Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Recently, I read a news article that the ceremonial keel laying of USS Enterprise is going to take place in just a couple of days on August 29th, 2022. For those of you who somehow haven't heard yet, the new Enterprise is going to be a Gerald R. Ford class nuclear aircraft carrier. A supercarrier of similar size to the most recent Enterprise, CVN-65. It's interesting that this Enterprise is nearly 1/6 of the way complete by the time that they're having the ceremonial keel laying. But that has to do with how modern ships are built. Instead of laying a keel and then building the frames and then putting the skin around it later, like you would have done with earlier Enterprises, now we are able to build ships in sections, different places, and then bring them all together and attach them at one time. This is far more efficient. However, quite frankly, it wasn't possible prior to the use of computer programs to see where things are going to be in your blueprints. Three-dimensional CAD type programs allow you to know exactly where you're going to put something. I've run into so many blueprints on this ship where one side of the wall, the pipe is over here, the other side of the wall, it's drawn over here. And it was up to the individual shipyards to get that correct. So you just couldn't build a ship in segments or else things weren't going to match up. Nowadays we can do that, but that's not what today's video is about. Every time I hear the name Enterprise, I think about the aircraft carrier CV-6, and I get just a little bit sad that she wasn't preserved as a museum ship. So in today's video, we're going to talk about the little bit of information that's out there on the effort to preserve her as a museum ship, and how sad I am that she wasn't preserved. Another thing that made me think about this is one of you guys, one of our viewers, sent in this meme of me saying, "Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Aircraft Carrier Enterprise Museum and Memorial." And I thought it was a really clever Photoshop. I even changed the logo on the shirt to a Yorktown-class carrier silhouette instead of an Io-class battleship. So that's another thing that had me thinking about the first aircraft carrier Enterprise. I can't help but think that if that ship had been preserved, that many of the artifacts, like Admiral Halsey's 4-star flag here, would be on display on her instead of here on New Jersey. So, Enterprise serves with distinction throughout World War II. In that single combat, she earns 20 battle stars, which is more than any other ship in world history. At the end of the war, there is an effort to preserve the ship. And early plans called for her being taken to New York City, and I can picture her being at the same pier that Intrepid is today. Unfortunately, these plans fell through. The modern concept of preserving a museum ship just didn't exist yet. You had commissioned vessels like the Constitution and Victory, which were still technically in active service, that were occasionally made open for the public to view. And you had ships like the Battleship Oregon, which was briefly turned into a museum ship in the 1920s and 30s, but then scrapped, given back to the Navy and scrapped. But there was no modern concept of a permanent museum vessel. And fortunately for us, the state of Texas said that they wanted to preserve their namesake battleship. And the Battleship Texas, because of that, is the only dreadnought-type battleship left anywhere in the world. And she became the first permanently operating museum ship in 1948. Well, the Enterprise story starts a little bit earlier than that. In 1946, with all of these brand new Essex-class carriers in service, with Enterprise, quite frankly, beat up. She was like a Frankenstein ship with all the scars and patches she had from battle damage. And with her design being limited by the Washington Naval Treaty, which limited her displacement and therefore the room for growth as late war and post-war aircraft, especially getting into the jet age, are growing in size, that really limited her ability. And at the end of the day, we had so many big, beautiful, brand new aircraft carriers that had so much less hard use on them that the Enterprise and just about every single other pre-war design ship are taken out of service. So in 1946, it's decided to decommission Enterprise. By 1947, the work is complete. And at that time, the idea was she was going to be opened in New York City. Well, the concept didn't exist yet, and it didn't happen right away. So the ship was put in the reserve fleet for a period of time. By 1948, Texas opens as a museum ship. But in this time period, the late 40s and the early 50s, we will only see a small number of decommissioned ships opened as museums. Ships like Texas, Olympia, and Constellation in Baltimore, which all open up in the early 50s. It's not until the mid-60s that you start to see battleships like North Carolina, Alabama, and other larger, more modern ships being turned into museums. So unfortunately, Enterprise, around 1958, 1959, the government decides to sell it for scrap. And an organization forms to try and raise the money to buy Enterprise, and they're unable to. And this is another interesting concept because the way the Navy now does ship donations is they give you the ship as is, where is for free. You don't have to buy her. You do have to prove that you are a viable candidate to operate this ship, and you have to show that you can raise a certain amount of money to be able to preserve a capital ship like this. So this may be some proto-attempt at that. You have to raise enough money to buy the ship to prove that you're able to be a steward of it, or it might have just been the Navy was going to sell it for scrap anyway, and a group of people got together and said, no, not if we buy her instead of whatever shipyard it ended up being. At the end of the day, even though Admiral Halsey lent his support and said that Enterprise should be preserved for future generations, this ends up not happening. And the ship is scrapped between 1958 and 1960. A few pieces are saved, such as the ship's bell and the ship's nameplate. The bell is at the Naval Academy. The nameplate is here in New Jersey because it's Halsey's home state. Naval Academy tried to get the tripod mast, the distinctive tripod foremast of Enterprise, to display on their grounds, but that fell through. So no major macro artifacts like that were saved. Fortunately, the name was so important that when we start building aircraft carriers again, that name is reused. And now with one nuclear enterprise being decommissioned, another one is immediately started. And I suspect we will continue to see the name Enterprise in the naval roles for years to come. This one will serve for probably 50 years or more if the earlier Enterprise and Nimitz classes are any indication. I expect the name Enterprise to continue being used well into the future. And that's just how USS Enterprise is going to have to be preserved, because we didn't save the historically significant Enterprise CV6, and then nuclear carriers cannot be preserved as museum ships for a number of reasons. So these two will not be saved, but as long as we keep an Enterprise in service, the name is living on just the same. So besides Enterprise, what are some other ships that you think should have been saved as a museum? Let us know in the comment section down below. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate the support. There's a link in the description below if you're interested in donating to continue helping the museum. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about us in the channel. Thanks for watching.